Hello there. Today I will be ranking all of our players from who I think is most likely to win, to least likely, in a tier list. The tier list will be based on how their game is looking going into next week, their potential long-term prospects, and how I think the edit is factoring into their chances to win or go far. This ranking is my own personal opinion, and tiers are not ordered in any particular order. This week Liana went home by virtue of being on the bottom, which is something I didn't expect to happen from last week's episode where I had her in the B tier. This episode surprised me when it showed us Liana, Dani, and Deshawn all being on the bottom, as I had all of them in high tiers last week. Regardless, with Dani and Deshawn immune, it left Liana as an easy option to vote out, which is ultimately what happened. Overall, Liana was too reliant on Shan, which is obvious as she immediately went home after Shan, but I still enjoyed her presence and her one-sided feud with Xander, so she will be missed by me. C tier this week is for players who I see having a low chance to win the game compared to the rest of the field. Not impossible, but low. First in the C tier this week is Deshawn, who drops all the way from one of the highest tiers from last week. My fear from last week came true for Deshawn, as people were willing to look at him as a threat instead of others at this point in the game as a consequence of no longer being able to hide behind Shan. With Liana now being voted out, it means Deshawn only has an ally in Dani left in the game, which leaves him powerless, meaning his fate is in someone else's hands. On the low chance that Deshawn actually makes it to final tribal council, I don't see him winning if he gets there, but time will tell. B tier this week is for players that have some chance to win, but ultimately have flaws that hold them back. First in the B tier is Heather, who remains in the same tier from last week. It was another quiet episode from Heather, something that we are used to seeing at this point, but that doesn't mean her place in the game has suffered. Heather is in no immediate danger of going home at this point, as there are bigger threats left in the game to worry about than her. No sane player should be looking at her, which means that she is likely going to be sitting in one of the 3 final tribal seats. I think the chance is low that she actually wins at the end, but the reason she isn't in the bottom tier is her good chance to actually make it to the end, something every winner must do. Next in the B tier, who drops from being the highest rated player last week. Dani's placing really shows that anything can happen on Survivor, and one vote can change the whole game. Dani is on the bottom of the tribe at this point with Deshawn, and I think it's likely that he is looked at to go home soon. He finally won an immunity this episode, which will put a bigger target on his back as an immunity threat, and everyone knows that he is very close to Deshawn, so it will be a good idea to get out a pair late into the game. He is a lesser target currently than Deshawn, which is why he's higher on the tier list, and he can win at the end, but Dani's biggest problem is getting there. A tier this week is for players who have a solid shot to win, but slightly worse than the tier above. First in the A tier this week is Rickar, who rises from last week. Rickar is the biggest threat in the game at this point, meaning that if he gets to the end then he has a very high chance of beating anyone sitting next to him at final tribal council. This was a big vote for Rickar, as he was very vulnerable to going home, but now there isn't much opportunity to take him out before the fire-making challenge at Final 4. Rickar is an immunity threat, which could make it very hard to send him home even if others try, which means that Rickar can easily win 1 or 2 immunities and go on to win the game. I can see Rickar either going home next episode, or going to the end and winning. He is playing this game very dangerously, and I am interested to see where he will go from here. Next in the A tier this week is Xander, who rises from the lowest tier from last week. Xander is a big threat in the game now, as he not only has an underdog story that could allow him to win at the end, he also has an idol, which means he is only 1 immunity challenge away from being able to make it to the Final 4 fire-making challenge. Xander is seemingly working with people on the tribe as opposed to being on the bottom, which means that he isn't even being looked at first to go home, and if he can make it through 1 vote, no matter how, there is a very high chance he will be sitting at the end. The biggest question now for Xander is whether or not the jury respects him at the end, as opposed to if he can get there. S tier this week is for players who I see having the best chance of winning the game. Our S tier player this week is Erika, who rises massively on the list from last week. Erika suddenly is in a power position in the game, being in the middle of the tribe, which means she is holding all of the power for the next votes. If Erika can make the right moves, I think she has a great chance of getting to the end by taking out bigger threats like Ricard and Deshawn, and have a great case against anyone left that she deserves to win. I don't think she will be looked at as a target, which means that her and Heather can decide who goes home if nothing changes. There is my current tier list of who I think is most likely to win and make it far. Keep in mind that these are just my opinions, and I am unspoiled this season, and this is very subject to change. We will see if anyone else will be able to rise to the S tier, and I am interested to see how the rest of the season will shake out. Thanks for watching. This has been Gold Card.